After the taking of Goldtown, Robert Baratheon was now free to leave the Vale, to return to his seat at Storm's End, in the Stormlands to the south, to call his own banners and rally his men for the war to come. Sailing from Goldtown with a small escort, Robert's journey would be far less eventful than that of Eddard Stark, whose travels back to Winterfell we have already documented. But Robert's path was in theory far more dangerous than his good friend Eddard, with the Lord of Storm's End having to sail through the Bay of Crabs, then around the edge of Blackwater Bay itself, perilously close to the Targaryen seat of Dragonstone, where the royal fleet of King Aerys II Targaryen would certainly be patrolling in the event Robert attempted to make his way home to Storm's End. But return home to Storm's End he did, almost completely without hindrance. Once there, Robert assumed that his bannermen would come flocking to his call, and most did, but not all. Like in the Vale, there were a handful of lords who had remained loyal to King Aerys II Targaryen and to the Iron Throne. It is believed that House Grandison, Catherine and Fell had been convinced by means unknown by the hand of the king, Lord Owen Merryweather, to oppose their lord's call for rebellion. So Robert could not think of marching his army north. He would, like Jon Arryn, have to consolidate his own power in the Stormlands first. Rallying your army takes time, and it would take time for Robert's loyal bannermen to reach Storm's End. And while the castle was near impregnable in a siege, for the moment at least, Robert Baratheon's position was weaker than he would have liked. But word reached him that houses Grandison, Catherine and Fell were marching to Summerhall, the ruined palace of House Targaryen in the Dornish Marches, meeting there, then planning to march on Storm's End. And in that, the rash and hot-headed Lord Robert Baratheon saw an opportunity. A risky one, but if he could prevail, would ensure his control of the Stormlands in one fell swoop. Against advice, he would take the more unexpected path and march to Summerhall to meet them. Calling what happens next the Battle at Summerhall is a bit of a misnomer, as in reality what occurred there was 3 separate smaller battles. Robert Baratheon, with haste with the loyal bannermen who had already reached Storm's End, marched on Summerhall, getting to the burned ruin before his adversaries. He would then write his name in legend, as he went on to fight 3 battles in the same day, defeating each of House Grandison, Catherine and Fell as they arrived. And while Robert did lose men, it is believed the losses were minimal. Lords Grandison and Catherine survived the battle. Lord Fell was killed, with his son, known as Silver Axe Fell, captured. Robert returned to Storm's End with his captives, and after some time in the dungeons, all 3 men bent the knee to Robert and joined his cause against King Aerys II. It is believed that in the days after the battles at Summerhall, Robert spent much of his time hunting with the defeatist loyalist commanders, while waiting for the rest of his bannermen to rally. His younger brother Stannis is said to have been angered by this, and protested that Grandison, Catherine and Fell would have happily handed Robert over to King Aerys for execution without a moment's hesitation if they had won at Summerhall, arguing his brother should have left them to rot in the dungeon as traitors, rather than treat them as you would an honoured guest. However, as is the running theme with Robert Baratheon, his brother's plea fell on deaf ears. The battles at Summerhall were a huge victory for Robert, whom for the most part at this stage in the war was an unknown and untested battle commander. His tactical outclassing of his foes caught the attention of many lords across Westeros, whom were maybe starting to see the young Stormlord as the real threat to House Targaryen for the first time. That is, if the Summerhall plan was in fact Robert's. While the strategy was credited to him, another of his bannermen, or perhaps a brother, could have been the true strategist of Summerhall. We will never know for sure, but as far as historical documentation goes, Robert Baratheon is the man credited. Before we move on, it seems prudent to take a moment now to talk about Robert Baratheon as a man, as this key context about his character goes some way in explaining his bold and rash decisions this hot-headed young lord would make over the course of the battles to come. Born in 262 AC, Robert was the firstborn child of Cassana Estamont and Stephen Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. He was just over a year older than his brother Stannis, who was born in 264 AC. When Robert was already in his teens, his younger brother, Renly, was born. As we have discussed, a friendship formed between Robert's father and Lord Jon Arryn during the War of the Ninepenny Kings. Robert would subsequently be fostered in the Vale by Jon Arryn, becoming fast friends with his foster brother, Eddard Stark. Robert still returned to Storm's End regularly, one time attending a tourney where he lost in a joust to Sir Barristan Selmy of the Kingsguard. Once he reached manhood, Robert spent less and less time at the Eyrie and more at Storm's End, given that he was the heir. It's been speculated by some that the death of his father and mother in 278 AC, while returning to the Stormlands after a mission in Essos for King Aerys II Targaryen, fueled Robert's hatred for House Targaryen and Aerys as far back as this time. With his father dead, Robert became Lord very suddenly at the age of 16. Some have attributed this young rise to lordship as a factor in Robert's temperamental personality and rashness. As we know, Robert was betrothed to Lyanna Stark when she was kidnapped by Rhaegar Targaryen, which added more fuel to the fire that was his dislike of House Targaryen. The truth is, for Robert at least, his betrothal to Lyanna was much more than that, and in reality, he had fallen deeply in love with Lyanna Stark. At the time of their betrothal, Robert already had a bastard daughter called Maya Stone in the Vale, which led to Lyanna commenting that Robert would never keep to one bed, despite his so-called love for her. Comments later made by Lord Eddard Stark would imply that Robert saw only Lyanna's beauty, and never truly recognised her boldness and strength of will, and thus they would never have truly been happy. All this fits into what we know of Robert's personality. One thing that became very apparent is Robert was well loved by his soldiers, with often his skilled arms and bravery cited as why. But in truth, the young lord was headstrong, rash and impatient, something clearly shown with the battles at Summerhall. Yes, Robert won the day, but it was an extremely risky course of action that very easily could have ended up going the other way. But being a proud man, Robert would never have let the affront of his lords standing against him lay. Regardless, Robert Baratheon was truly fearless in battle, in a way only a green young man would be. But as he showed in the wake of Summerhall, he could be merciful and forgiving to even his foes and defeated enemies, with a keen ability to inspire loyalty and friendship in those he spared. While he did have a skill with a blade, even from youth, Robert preferred the unconventional, spiked iron warhammer, with Donald Noy, the blacksmith of Storm's End, making the famed one he used during the rebellion. Noy also made him a great antlered helmet that made him look like a horned god given his tall stature. Despite the numerous weapons in his armory, the only blade Robert ever used is a hunting knife he received as a boy from Jon Arryn. Given everything we have learned about Lord Robert Baratheon, it's not hard to understand why the charismatic young lord will become the centre of this rebellion, and why it became Robert's.